Hey guys, welcome back to the Green Room with Pastor Gary, and we're in Romans chapter 7. It's taken us a while to get here, but we are here. Last week we started into verses 1 through 13, and just as a quick snapshot review, Romans 6, we talked about the problem of our sin, and in Romans 7, we're going to talk about the segue between 6 and 8. So from 6, we talk about the problem of sin, and in chapter 7, we're going to talk about the problem within, which is the law actually creates. And then chapter 8, we're going to talk about the cure, which is the Spirit-filled life. So last week we started out talking about these first two segments in verses 1 through 3 and 4 through 6. We talked about the reason that we've become free from the law. And then we looked at a video from Bible Project, and I love these guys. We use a lot of the videos in the Bible overview, but I actually started a Bible plan from the Bible Project this year. I do the 1-year Bible, and I'm reading through that, and it's sponsored by Bible Project. So they're interspersing their videos, and it's really cool, book by book. They do an overview, snapshot overview of every one of these, and so they also hit a lot of the key concepts, and it's just a great resource and tool. Now, Pastor Brian will tell you, I don't agree with every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Bible Projecteth guys. There's a couple of times that I've gone, but for the most part, I would say, yeah, pretty good stuff. Really, really good. So I hope that video was really fun for you. Then we talked about the results of being free from the law, verses 4 through 6, that we receive a new freedom, that we've entered into a new relationship, and that we receive a new purpose. And so today we're going to continue in that in verse 6, and we're going to look at this in verse 6. We're going to talk about a new motivation, a brand new motivation. In Romans 7:6, the Bible says, "But now we have been released from the law, for we died to it and are no longer captive to its power, so that now we can serve God, not in the old way of obeying the letter of the law, but in the new way of living in the Spirit." So I want to emphasize this concept of a new way of living. Now, the last session we talked about as an illustration, Paul dives into this illustration of marriage, and he starts talking about marriage that was this covenant commitment of marriage, and that the wife is bound to the husband so long as he is alive, and vice versa. But he gave the illustration that if the husband dies, she's free. She's been set free from that covenantal obligation that she made. And we talked about Mr. Law, what it would be like to be married to Mr. Law. Not fun. It would be pretty bad. He's got a lot of rules, and you dang well better do them. And in fact, the problem with the Mr. Law is that if you fail one, you fail them all. And that's what Paul says. You know, the totality of the law. We fail everything because the standard is perfection. Now that Mr. Law is dead, she's free to marry, and so she marries a brand new husband. Let's call him Mr. Grace. And Mr. Grace is the bomb.com. He loves her. He is attentive to her. He cares about her needs. He spends time developing the relationship. He makes sure that they go to dinner where she wants to go. You know, he is amazing. Everything she ever dreamed of. And so with this, we would begin to see some comparisons. So, for example, she might do all the same things that Mr. Law used to want done. Mm-hmm. You know, make sure you have this house, and you do this, and you keep it clean. We do the dishes, and you got a meal, and all this kind of stuff. But the whole aspect of how she responds to the needs of her husband, completely different.
Can I share a story on that?
Yeah.
When Kate and I first got married, it might have even been on our honeymoon. I don't remember exactly what. We went to this old bookstore. We like going to old stores and we found a Betty Crocker cookbook it was the edition that Kate's grandmother had. And she was like, I have to have this. So we got it. And she opens up and we're looking like, oh my goodness, look at this about the eggs. Look at how you're supposed to. And it literally said, it is vitally important that a good wife knows how to make the eggs exactly the way her husband likes it. And Kate was like, and we got a big old kick out of that, like, oh, this is so funny. This old-timey thing that, this wife better know how to make the eggs the right exact way your husband likes it. But, we've been married over 15, 16, 17 years now, and we joke about this because now it's kind of like, well, which way do you like the eggs, honey? You know what I mean? And as your relationship matures, and so it's the same thing. This starting out the relationship is just this legalistic, oh, I can't believe you would demand that I make the eggs the way you like, to this grace-based kind of thing. We're like, well, actually, I kind of like you.
Now, we might say to ourselves, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy because, no wife is going to respond to that. But let's go a layer deeper. Let's go into psychology this session, okay? The reason any of that would ever worked was not because the culture was so backwards, but because there is, both then and now, there is a sense that a wife is like, I really want to please my husband. If you love a person, you're going to feel that. Yep. And the husband wants to please the wife. So it's tapping into this sense that we want to have a good relationship. We want to do things that make each other happy. We're trying to. And the overlay of the law was a series of oughtas. You oughta. Yeah. And it's this strong, guilt-driven pressure. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine the pressure women felt in that environment, in that cultural setting, where there was all these, to be a good wife, mm-hmm. And, there's 50 different things, and everybody's got an opinion, and, the Stepfords, they have their opinions too. Yeah. There's all this overlay of this is what it's going to be like, and that, that kind of is that Mr. Law. It's mm-hmm. this high pressure, and the only reason it works is because the wife does have a sense that I really do want to fulfill these things. And when we talk about the law, and we're going to go deeper here in just a minute, there's a lot of stuff you say, of course I would want to, right. Thou shalt not murder. I mean, of course I want to respect and life and honor, and of course we want that. But the overlay mm-hmm. is the motivational, and that's mm-hmm. what he's talking about here. What drives us towards a sense of obedience? And so in the old system, it was all about this sense of obligation. But now I obey out of a sense of that I love the new spouse, and there's a sense of a healthy relationship, and it's love-driven, not guilt-driven. Mm-hmm. It's joy-driven, not dread-driven. It's a sense of gratitude, not a sense of guilt. So what changed? The contract of marriage, or was it the purity of the motive? And that's what it's about. We've got a staffer. I won't name Stacy, but we have a staffer. Right. that first time she said it, you think she's cussing.
Yeah, that's right.
She'll say, "Don't shit on me."
Don't you shit on me.
Now let's do this in slow-mo because everybody out there go, what just happened? Don't should on me. Now what is she saying? When we use that word should, this is really, really powerful. When we use the word should or ought to, there's a psychology behind it. It causes two things. First, it causes procrastination. Mm-hmm. How many of us have said this? Man, I really should go on a diet. Mm-hmm. I really should start going to the gym. Man, I really should get up earlier. But what happens when we say should is that we actually are pushing the ball, we're kicking the can down the road and say, I probably will someday, but not right now. Mm-hmm. The second thing it does is not only procrastination, but it puts in a standard demotivation. I feel demotivated because I feel talked down to. Mm-hmm. The law nags us, but love motivates us. And this is the difference between the law and love. The law is really nagging. Does nagging work for you? Mm-mm. I mean, when I'm nagged, I actually automatically want to say, no. Yeah. I think not.
Yeah. when you tell me, hey, you should do this, well, that kind of pre-assumes that I should have already known that I should have done
what's
that.
Wrong with you?
You ought to have done this. Well, I should have, So preemptive to all that statement, I am already a failure. I have pre-failed in that course of that conversation, and that's not going to help you get the ball rolling.
So the only right motive is love. So that leads us to this natural sense of, okay, is the law just bad? So Gary, talk to us about the purpose of the law.
Yeah, because the answer to me is no, it's not bad. There are some real purposes, but in the other sense is, well, kind of, yeah, there was some negative stuff there. It's kind of like, well, I'm glad we're kind of out of that, right? Woo! So it's kind of yes and no. Obviously, God is still against all the big things like idolatry and idolatry and stealing and lying and rape and abuse and murder and all those things that you see in the Ten Commandments and all throughout the Old Testament. But in two really, really big ways, the law is kind of done away with. It's kind of changed for at least two big aspects. And one is the idea of the law is setting up this kind of like ethnic nation state covenant with Israel. Right?
Yeah, so let's stop there. That's a big mouthful.
Yeah.
In Bible overview, we talk about this concept that when they're delivered out of Egypt and they get to Mount Sinai, God crafts a constitutional agreement. And that constitution is the law. Mm-hmm. And they spent a lot of time there at Mount Sinai as the law is being developed. And it really was the development of a constitution for the start of a new nation. It was God's agreement of how the nation would operate. Mm-hmm. God would be the president, mm-hmm. and he was the top ruler, but the people were agreeing to abide by this constitutional agreement. Yeah. So that's what we mean by that ethnocentric Israel.
And the biblical word for that constitutional agreement is covenant. So that's a good one for us to hold on to. And one of the key things from that was you're either them or you're not. These were the people that God was going to have a relationship with, and that relationship was almost contingent on the following of this covenant. And what we see when the law is gone, it kind of says, okay, that served its purpose, but now everybody has a chance to get in. So this is a huge deal. Like, wow.
Yeah. So let's be clear. There is an end to the nation of Israel. So even when we walk into the New Testament, we find a whole new world. Mm-hmm. It's not the Israel that we saw with the kings and during this time, that Israel sinned itself out of the contract of being that covenant nation. So that's a problem in itself, because a lot of the laws applied only to the formation of that nation still being in operation.
Yep. Lots of purposes behind that too, and lots of good stuff we can still learn from it. But that's looking back, hindsight's 20/20 kind of thing, where we can dissect and pick those things out and say,
so that's some of the law that's been.
Yeah. The other piece is the fact that the temple was replaced. Now that's another super kind of illusory kind of thing. Like, what do we mean by that? So the temple was this place where this is where God is. And if I want to go be in God's presence, I have to do the right things. I can go there, and then I can make my sacrifice, and then the person who's really holy enough, the priest, he can go in and do the thing. But what did we see when Jesus died on the cross? Well, the curtain was torn in two, right? And that curtain was the thing that kept the Holy of Holies, the most innermost part of this temple where God was supposed to be, where he was, and it kept everyone else out except for the one time of year when the sacrifices were made. That curtain's what separated that. And when Jesus died on the cross to make a way for us to be able to have access to God again, it ripped from top to bottom. And it was this huge symbolic moment of, now I'm not staying in these temples anymore. Yeah. The Holy Spirit's going to come and live in your heart now. If you accept my son Jesus, now you have access to me like we've never been able to have before. So the laws around temple worship and temple practice are now put aside.
Which is ginormous, because so much of the Old Testament covenant deals with those two areas. What it is to be God's people, that's all the festivals and the ceremonies and the laws around how they would interact. But then also the laws centered around the temple, the sacrificial systems, the priesthood, the Levites, the division of the tribe, all of that. Yep. So you've got a super, super high, probably 50% of the law tied up in just those two areas, which have been nullified.
Yeah. And that's why
those are huge.
Yeah. That's why you don't see us making sacrifices today.
Yeah.
Right. That's why you don't see us observing the Sabbath the way they did in the Old Testament times. With this strict. That's why you don't see us. Who doesn't want to eat some crabs on the Eastern Shore, right? So the kosher food laws. That's not going to apply to us anymore. But even though we've set apart those things aside, that doesn't apply to us before. That doesn't mean that the law is irrelevant for us. They're still a huge deal.
We're gonna cut off here, but here's the point that I want to get, because next time we're going to talk about what are those purposes, and Paul lists these for us, but this answers the question here. Many Christians will ask this, now that I'm a believer, what good is the Old Testament? And that's where we're going to go, because the first answer to that we're saying now is that clearly you don't throw it out. Right. We don't take the Old Testament and just throw it away. It has huge purpose in the life of believers, and clearly we would never say that now I'm a believer, thou shalt not kill does not apply.
Right.
I mean, that's just silly. There's so much that does apply. So what are those areas that we need to pay attention to, and how does the Old Testament operate in the life of a believer? That is what we're going to cover next time. We'll see you then.